I stood at the cruise terminal holding my ticket, searching for the gate number, when I overheard my son Bradley on the phone. "Yeah, Dad's about to board. The nursing home in Miami is expecting him when the ship docks. He has no idea it's one way." My heart shattered as I realized my own son was shipping me off permanently disguised as a vacation gift. I quietly stepped back into the terminal bathroom, my mind racing. "All right, Bradley, if that's what you want, but you're going to regret this." The fluorescent lights in the terminal bathroom flickered as I gripped the cold porcelain sink, trying to process what I'd just heard. My own son Bradley, the boy I'd raised after his mother died when he was 12, was planning to abandon me like some unwanted pet. The cruise ticket in my pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I splashed water on my face and looked at my reflection. At 68, I might have appeared frail to others, especially since I'd lost weight after Martha's death 2 years ago. But my mind was sharp as ever. The construction company I'd built from nothing still ran through my veins, and I wasn't about to let anyone, not even my own blood, treat me like discarded lumber. Walking back to the ticket counter, I put on my best confused elderly act. "Excuse me, miss," I said to the young agent, letting my voice waver slightly. "I can't seem to find my return date on this ticket. My eyes aren't what they used to be." She studied the documents, her brow furrowing. "Sir, this is a one-way ticket to Miami. There's no return booking." "One way." I let my hand tremble as I reached for the counter. "But my son said it was a relaxation cruise. How long is the trip?" 7 days, sir, docking in Miami." "And then what? How do I get home to Denver?" She looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, sir. You'd have to book a return flight separately. This booking only covers the outbound cruise." I thanked her and shuffled away, my mind working furiously. Outside, I called a taxi, making sure Bradley had already left the terminal. I told the driver I felt nauseated and needed to go home, that I'd catch a later flight to meet the ship at its first stop. The lie came easily when survival was at stake. The taxi dropped me 2 blocks from my house. I walked through the Hendersons' backyard, remembering how their German Shepherd Max had died last winter. No barking to worry about now. My hands found the spare key I'd hidden inside the fake rock near Martha's rose garden, the one Bradley never knew about because he'd never helped with the gardening. I entered through the basement door, moving silently through the house I'd built with my own hands 40 years ago. Every creak of the floorboards was familiar, and I knew exactly which ones to avoid. As I climbed the stairs, I heard voices from the living room. "The agent will be here tomorrow at 10, Bradley was saying. "Dad should be somewhere in the middle of the ocean by then." "Are you sure about this?" Jennifer's voice carried a note of worry. My daughter-in-law had always been the nervous type. "What if someone asks questions? Your dad has friends." "I've already handled it. Told the neighbors he decided to retire to Florida permanently. Said the cold was getting to his bones. They bought it completely. Even Earl thinks it's a good idea." Earl, my best friend for 30 years, and Bradley had lied to him too. "What about the bank accounts?" Jennifer asked. "Power of attorney documents are already filed. Forged his signature perfectly. Years of practicing his handwriting on birthday cards finally paid off." Bradley laughed, and the sound made my stomach turn. "By the time anyone thinks to question it, he'll be tucked away in that nursing home and we'll have full control of everything." I pressed record on my phone, holding it steady against the wall. The device had been a birthday gift from Bradley last year. Ironic that his gift would now document his betrayal. "The main account has 800,000, Bradley continued. "Plus, the house is worth at least 600,000 in this market. The construction company assets his truck tools, everything together, we're looking at close to 2 million. "What about Martha's jewelry? Those pieces must be worth something." "Already packed them up. There's an estate dealer coming next week. Mom's engagement ring alone is worth 20,000. My fist clenched. Martha's ring. The one I'd saved for 6 months to buy when we were young, and broke living on love and dreams. She'd worn it for 46 years, never taking it off even when her fingers swelled with arthritis. Bradley, what if he calls someone? What if he figures out the ticket is one way? He won't. I've been increasing his blood pressure medication for months. Doctor thinks he's developing dementia. He's been confused forgetting things. Everyone's noticed. That's why this cruise is perfect timing. A confused old man gets lost in Miami, ends up in a facility. Happens every day. The blood pressure medication. I'd wondered why I'd been feeling foggy lately, why simple tasks seemed harder. My own son had been poisoning me. Besides, Bradley added, I already called the cruise line. Told them he has mild Alzheimer's tendency to wander. They'll keep an eye on him, make sure he doesn't cause problems. What about the house won't people notice if we sell it too fast? I'll tell everyone he asked me to handle it that he didn't want to deal with the memories. People eat up that sentimental crap. We'll have it on the market within a month, sold within 2. By summer, we'll be debt-free and living in that new development across town. Debt-free. What debts could Bradley have that would drive him to this? Marcus called earlier, Jennifer said. He wants to know when you'll have his money. Tell him next month. Once the house sells, I can pay off the gambling debts and we're clear. He's been patient this long. He can wait another few weeks. Gambling debts. My successful son, the one with the accounting degree, and the nice office downtown, was in debt to someone named Marcus. Deep enough debt to steal his father's life savings. I should check Dad's room, Bradley said. Make sure we got all the valuable stuff. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly descended the stairs, slipping out the basement door just as Bradley's footsteps reached the upper landing. I made it to the neighbor's hedge before the rage hit me full force. My hands shook not from medication or age, but from pure fury. But I didn't scream. I didn't storm back inside and confront them. Instead, I walked calmly back to the main road and called another taxi. The driver looked concerned when he saw my face. You all right, sir? Just received some difficult news, I said truthfully. Could you take me to the Marriott downtown? As we drove away from the house I'd built from the roses I'd planted for Martha, from the son I'd loved more than life itself, I began to plan. Bradley thought he was dealing with a confused old man. He was about to learn that Newton Crawford might be old, but he was far from finished. The hotel room was expensive, but money wasn't an issue when you had accounts your son didn't know existed. 30 years in construction had taught me to always keep reserves, always have a backup plan. Bradley might have found the main accounts, but he didn't know about the business reserves, the emergency funds I'd tucked away in different banks under the company's name. I sat on the bed and played the recording again, each word cutting deeper than the last. Then I opened my laptop and began making a list. If Bradley wanted to play this game, I'd show him how it was done. But first, I needed to understand the full scope of his betrayal. My phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. Hey Dad, just wanted to make sure you made it to the ship okay. Have a great trip, love you. I stared at those 2 words. Love you. How many times had he said them over the years when I taught him to ride a bike? When I walked him down the aisle at his wedding? When Martha died and we held each other crying at her funeral? I typed back, thanks son, feeling a bit confused. Might have gotten the dates wrong. See you soon. Let him think his poison was working. Let him believe his plan was succeeding. Bradley had made one crucial mistake in his perfect scheme. He'd forgotten who taught him everything he knew about planning and patience. The construction business had shown me that the strongest foundations were built slowly, carefully, one piece at a time. Bradley's house of cards was about to meet a wrecking ball named Newton Crawford, and I had all the time in the world to swing it. The Marriott's coffee tasted bitter at 4 a.m, but I needed the caffeine to fuel what came next. My construction crews had always started before dawn, and old habits served me well now. While Bradley and Jennifer slept peacefully in their bed, dreaming of spending my money, I was already 3 moves ahead. My first call was to Harold Westbrook. Most people thought my lawyer friend had retired to Arizona to play golf and complain about his arthritis. What they didn't know was that Harold had kept his law license active and still handled special cases for old clients. The phone rang twice before his gravelly voice answered. "Newton Christ, it's early even for you." "Harold, I need you to listen carefully. Bradley's trying to put me in a home and steal everything." There was a pause then. "I knew something was off when he called last month, asking about power of attorney procedures. Claimed you wanted him to help manage your affairs. What's happening?" I explained everything while Harold listened in silence. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "That little bastard. Martha would have skinned him alive. You got proof. Recording on my phone. But I need more. And I need to protect the assets before he drains them. I'm catching the next flight out. Meanwhile, go to my old office. Remember Sam, my paralegal. He's running the place now. Tell him I sent you. He'll start the paperwork to freeze everything. And Newton, don't go home. If Bradley's desperate enough to poison you, he might escalate if cornered." After hanging up, I took a taxi to the industrial district, where I kept a small office Bradley had never known about. The building was nothing special, just a converted warehouse, where I stored old equipment and paperwork. But the basement held something more valuable, a complete record of every transaction, every contract, every financial decision I'd made in 30 years of business. I unlocked the reinforced door and descended into my private sanctuary. File cabinets lined the walls, and a desk sat in the corner with a computer that wasn't connected to any network Bradley could access. This was where I'd always done my real thinking away from the house, away from distractions. Martha had called it my fortress of solitude, joking that every man needed a cave. The first folder I pulled contained the business reserve accounts. 3 different banks, each holding enough to live comfortably for years. Bradley had found the obvious money, the accounts we used for daily expenses, and the pension funds. But these reserves were registered under the construction company's subsidiary corporations, paper, entities. My accountant had set up for tax purposes that Bradley had never bothered to understand. Next, I called Diane Morrison. She'd been recommended by a client whose cheating husband had tried to hide assets during their divorce. Diane had found every penny plus evidence of 3 mistresses and a gambling problem that made the judge award everything to the wife. If anyone could dig up Bradley's secrets, it was her. "Morrison Investigations," she answered, sounding alert despite the early hour. "Ms. Morrison, my name is Newton Crawford. I need someone followed and investigated. Price is no object, but discretion is essential." "I'm listening." 20 minutes later, I'd hired her to shadow Bradley and Jennifer for the next week. She promised regular updates and complete documentation of their activities. Her retainer fee would have made Bradley choke, but it was worth every cent to know what my son was really up to. By 6 in the morning, I was at the medical center waiting for the lab to open. The young technician looked puzzled when I requested a comprehensive blood test and toxicology screen. "Are you experiencing symptoms, Mr. Crawford?" "Memory issues, confusion, fatigue. My son's been helping with my medications, but I want to make sure the dosages are correct." She nodded sympathetically. "Elder care can be tricky. Sometimes family members make mistakes with complex medication schedules. We'll run everything and have results by tomorrow." Family members making mistakes. If only it were that innocent. My next stop was Sam's office. Harold's former paralegal had grown into a sharp lawyer himself, and his eyes hardened as I played the recording. "We need to move fast," he said, fingers already flying over his keyboard. "First, we'll file emergency injunctions to freeze all asset transfers. Second, we'll revoke any power of attorney claims. Third, we'll notify the banks about potential fraud. Bradley won't be able to touch a penny without setting off alarms. What about the house? I'll file a LS pendens this afternoon. That'll stop any sale dead in its tracks. Anyone trying to buy it will see there's a legal claim pending. No realtor will touch it." While Sam worked his legal magic, I drove to my storage unit across town. Inside were boxes of Martha's actual jewelry, the pieces I'd moved there after she died. knowing they'd be safer than in the house. Bradley had packed up costume jewelry and cheap replicas Martha wore daily to avoid attracting thieves. The real valuables, including her grandmother's pearl necklace and the diamond earrings I'd given her for our 25th anniversary, were secure in climate-controlled storage. My phone buzzed. Diane Morrison was already earning her fee. "Your son just entered the Apex Casino on Colfax. Been there 2 hours. Want me to go inside?" "Yes. Find out how much he owes and to whom." The Apex was known for its high-stakes games and dangerous clientele. What was my accountant's son doing in a place that laundered money for people who broke kneecaps? By noon, I'd accomplished more than Bradley would think possible for a demented old man. Bank accounts were frozen, legal protections were in place, and his secrets were being dragged into the light. But I needed more. I needed to understand why. I returned to the hotel and found a message waiting. Dr. Marcus Chen from the medical center wanted to speak with me urgently. When I called back, his voice was carefully controlled. "Mr. Crawford, your blood work shows dangerous levels of lisinopril, nearly 3 times the prescribed dose. Have you been taking extra medication?" "No, doctor. My son's been managing my pills. Said it would help me remember better." The silence stretched before he spoke again. "Mr. Crawford, this level of medication could cause severe confusion, memory loss, and fatigue. It mimics dementia symptoms. I'm required to report this to Adult Protective Services. Can you come in immediately?" "I'll be there in an hour. And doctor, please document everything. I have a feeling I'll need it for legal purposes." After hanging up, I sat on the hotel bed and allowed myself a moment of grief. Not for what Bradley was trying to do to me, but for the boy he'd once been. The child who'd helped me build a treehouse in the backyard, who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd held my hand at Martha's funeral and promised we'd take care of each other. Where had that boy gone? My phone rang. Diane again. "Newton, you need to know something. Your son owes Marcus Volkov $150,000. Volkov's not the patient type. Word is Bradley promised full payment by end of month, or they start with fingers." Marcus Volkov. I'd heard the name in construction circles. He owned several investment firms that were fronts for loan sharking and money laundering. Bradley hadn't just developed a gambling problem. He'd gotten into bed with the Russian mob. "There's more," Diane continued. "Jennifer's been meeting with someone at the Hilton every Wednesday afternoon. Same room, same time. Want photos." "Get them. And Diane, find out if Bradley has a life insurance policy on me." "Already checking. I'll know by tomorrow." The pieces were falling into place, each more damning than the last. But I couldn't strike too soon. Bradley needed to believe his plan was working, needed to feel secure in his victory. The best demolitions were the ones where the building fell straight down, contained and complete. I spent the afternoon setting up security cameras in the house, entering through the basement while Bradley was at work. The cameras were tiny, state-of-the-art, and connected to cloud storage Bradley couldn't access. Every room was covered, every conversation would be recorded. As I worked, I found more evidence of his betrayal. My important documents were missing from the safe, including birth certificates, social security cards, and Martha's death certificate. In the kitchen trash, I found empty pill bottles with my name on them, the labels carefully peeled off. He'd been refilling my prescriptions and hoarding the medication, probably to make his poisoning look like an accident if questioned. But the worst discovery was in Martha's craft room. Her quilting supplies were boxed up her lifetime of fabric and patterns headed for the dump. On top was a photo album I recognized, filled with pictures of our life together. Bradley had written "trash" across the cover in black marker. I picked up the album and opened it. Our wedding photo stared back at me, Martha radiant in her simple dress, me grinning like I'd won the lottery, which I had in every way that mattered. Bradley had been willing to throw away not just my life, but every memory of his mother. That's when I knew there would be no mercy in what came next. I left the house as silently as I'd entered, but not before placing one more camera in Bradley's home office. If he was planning anything else, I'd know about it before he did it. Back at the hotel, I ordered room service and opened my laptop. Harold had sent encrypted files detailing the legal strategy. Sam had successfully frozen all accounts and filed the necessary paperwork. The banks had been notified the house was protected, and Bradley's power of attorney claims were now under investigation for fraud. But I wasn't done, not even close. I pulled out a yellow legal pad and began writing. Every contact in construction, every favor owed every person who'd benefit from knowing what Bradley was planning. By the time I finished, I had a list of 47 names. People who trusted me, who'd done business with me for decades, who'd be horrified to learn what my son was attempting. The phone rang one more time as the sun set over Denver. Diane's voice was grim. "Newton, you were right about the life insurance. Bradley took out a $2 million policy on you 6 months ago. You supposedly signed it, but the signature's wrong. I've got a handwriting expert who will testify it's forged. And Newton, the beneficiary isn't just Bradley. It's split between him and Marcus Volkov." I closed my eyes and let that sink in. My son hadn't just planned to steal from me. He'd set me up to die probably alone in some Miami facility, where a confused elderly man's death wouldn't raise questions. The cruise ticket wasn't just one way to Miami. It was meant to be one way to the grave. "Thank you, Diane. Send everything to Harold Westbrook. He'll know what to do with it." After hanging up, I stood at the window watching the city lights twinkle below. Somewhere out there, Bradley was probably celebrating his successful scheme, counting money that would never be his planning a future built on his father's bones. Let him celebrate. Let him think he'd won. Because Newton Crawford had built an empire from nothing survived Martha's death and raised a son alone. I'd faced down corrupt city inspectors' union strikes and economic crashes that destroyed lesser companies. Bradley thought he was playing chess while I played checkers. He was about to learn that I'd been playing a different game entirely, one where patience wasn't just a virtue, but a weapon. The next phase would require careful timing and flawless execution. But first I had a doctor's appointment to keep and a paper trail to build. Every step Bradley had taken in his betrayal would be documented, verified, and prepared for presentation. Because when Newton Crawford built something, whether it was a skyscraper or a case against his own son, he built it to last. And the foundation of Bradley's destruction was already set in stone. 3 days had passed since my supposed departure on the cruise. According to Bradley's timeline, I should have been somewhere off the coast of Mexico, confined to a ship, with no way to contact anyone, slowly sailing toward my permanent exile. Instead, I sat in my truck outside my own house at 5:30 in the morning, watching the sunrise paint the Colorado sky pink and gold. The blood work had confirmed Dr. Chen's suspicions. The report in my briefcase detailed dangerous levels of medication that could have killed me if I'd continued taking it much longer. Adult Protective Services had opened a case file. The investigator, a sharp woman named Lydia Santos, had taken my statement with barely concealed fury. "Elder abuse by family members is more common than people think," she'd said. "But premeditated poisoning, that's attempted murder, Mr. Crawford. Your son crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." Now it was time to cross a few lines of my own. I waited until I saw Jennifer's car leave the driveway. Her Wednesday routine was predictable gym coffee with her sister, then her weekly shopping trip that Diane had confirmed was actually a rendezvous with Marcus Volkov at the Hilton. My daughter-in-law was playing her own dangerous game, probably trying to secure her future, regardless of which man came out on top. I shuffled up to my front door, shoulders hunched, moving like the confused old man Bradley expected. The key turned slowly in the lock, my hands making it shake for the benefit of any watching neighbors. Inside, I called out weakly, "Bradley, Jennifer. I'm home. I think I got confused." Bradley burst from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, face cycling through shock, anger, and forced concern in the space of seconds. "Dad, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be on the cruise." I let my eyes wander unfocused, reaching out to steady myself against the wall. Cruise was that today I went to the airport, but couldn't remember which gate. Nice young lady at the counter said my ticket was wrong. Only went one way. I looked at him with practiced confusion. Why would you buy me a ticket that only goes one way, son? Bradley's face went pale, but he recovered quickly. Oh, Dad, that must have been a mistake at the travel agency. Here, come sit down. You look tired. He guided me to the living room, his hands gentle but his eyes calculating. I could see him revising his plan, figuring out how to salvage the situation. I'll call the cruise line, he said. Explain the confusion. Maybe we can book you on next week's departure. Would you like that? I suppose, I mumbled, sinking into my recliner. But I'm so tired lately, and confused. Maybe I should see Dr. Patterson. No need for that, Bradley said quickly. I've been in touch with him. He says it's just a natural part of aging. Here, let me get your medications. He returned with the pill organizer, watching carefully as I pretended to take the poison he'd prepared. In reality, I'd palmed the pills, a trick learned from a mechanic who'd been a magician in his youth. The tablets went into my pocket for evidence, while Bradley smiled his serpent smile. Why don't you rest, Dad? I'll handle everything. I closed my eyes, listening as he made phone calls. First to the cruise line, rebooking my passage for the following week. Then to someone else, his voice dropping to a whisper. He came back. No, I don't know how. Just shut up and listen. We proceed as planned. I'll up his dosage, make sure he's really out of it this time. Yes, the paperwork's ready. Trust me, one more week and it's done. Through barely opened eyes, I watched him rifling through papers at the desk. He pulled out documents, studying them intently. Even from across the room, I could see they were bank statements, property deeds, and what looked like medical power of attorney forms. Dad, he said, approaching with the papers. While you're here, we should take care of some administrative stuff. Just routine signatures. Here, let me guide your hand. He placed a pen in my fingers and positioned a document in front of me. The line for signature was highlighted, but the rest of the page was covered with other papers. Amateur move. Any construction contract taught you to read every word before signing anything. I signed with a shaky hand, but not my real signature. Instead, I scrawled Mickey Mouse in barely legible script. Let him try to cash that at the bank. I signed 6 more documents the same way, each signature more ridiculous than the last. Donald Duck, Goofy, Pluto. Bradley was so focused on getting the signatures, he never actually looked at them. Perfect, Dad. This'll make everything easier for both of us. Bradley, I said, letting my voice quaver. I saw Martha yesterday. He froze. Dad, Mom's been gone 2 years. No, she was in the garden. Said you'd been naughty. Said you took her ring. His face flushed. You're confused. Why don't you take a nap? I nodded dozily but kept my ears sharp as he made another call. Jennifer, get home now. He's here and he's worse than before. Talking about seeing Mom. Yeah, I got him to sign everything. We just need to keep him calm until next week. 20 minutes later, Jennifer arrived, flustered and annoyed. Through my sleeping state, I heard them arguing in the kitchen. This is getting too complicated, she hissed. What if someone notices he's back? I'll handle it. Told the Petersons he got confused at the first port, and they sent him home. Everyone knows he's been declining. What about Earl? He stopped by yesterday asking questions. Earl's an old fool. I told him Dad's in Florida already sent him photos from the cruise website. He bought it. They moved to the living room, voices dropping as they saw me sleeping. Jennifer approached, and I caught a whiff of cologne that definitely wasn't Bradley's. Diane's surveillance was accurate. Maybe we should speed things up, she suggested. Marcus is getting impatient. Marcus can wait. Once Dad's declared incompetent and institutionalized, we'll have access to everything. Your boyfriend will get his money. He's not in my... Save it, Jen. I know about the Hilton. I don't care. Hell, once this is over, you can have him. Just keep him calm until we close this deal. So Bradley knew about the affair and didn't care. My son had become a stranger, someone who'd trade his wife as easily as he'd trade his father. Martha would have wept to see what he'd become. I stirred in the chair, mumbling incoherently about needing the bathroom. Bradley helped me up, steadying me as I shuffled down the hall. In the bathroom, I quickly texted Harold, "Document signed as planned, all cartoon characters, recording everything." When I emerged, I accidentally knocked over a vase in the hallway. As Bradley rushed to clean it up, complaining about my clumsiness, I palmed his cell phone from the hall table where he'd left it. In the confusion of broken ceramic and spilled water, he didn't notice. "I'm so sorry," I mumbled. "Clumsy. So clumsy lately." "It's fine, Dad. Just go sit down." Back in my chair, I quickly scrolled through his phone while he and Jennifer cleaned up the mess. The text messages told a brutal story. Conversations with Marcus Volkov, detailing payment plans, threats if he didn't deliver. Messages to a realtor about the house promising it would be available soon. Emails to a nursing home in Miami confirming a reservation for Newton Crawford severe dementia patient. But the worst was a message thread with someone named Dr. Reed. Patient should be showing significant cognitive decline by now, increased dosage as discussed, natural causes within 3 to 6 months expected. They weren't just planning to steal from me, they were planning to kill me, slowly making it look like natural decline. Dr. Reed, whoever he was providing medical cover for murder. I screenshot everything and sent it to my own phone before deleting the evidence of my snooping. Then I placed Bradley's phone on the floor beside my chair, where it would look like it had fallen from his pocket. "Your phone, son," I called out weakly when he returned. He snatched it up, checking it suspiciously, but I'd covered my tracks well. 3 decades of construction contracts had taught me about paper trails and digital footprints. "Dad, I've been thinking," Bradley said, settling across from me. "Maybe we should have Dr. Reed examine you. He specializes in geriatric care." "Whatever you think is best," I agreed, playing the compliant patient. The afternoon dragged on with Bradley hovering, making sure I took my medications on schedule. Each time I palmed the pills, building a collection of evidence in my pocket. Jennifer disappeared for her Wednesday appointment, returning with mussed hair and the guilty look of someone living multiple lies. Around 4 o'clock, I made my move. "Bradley, I feel dizzy," I said, standing up too quickly. Then I let myself fall. Not a hard fall, nothing that would actually hurt me, but dramatic enough to sell the performance. I went down beside the coffee table, knocking over Jennifer's purse in the process. "Dad." Bradley rushed over, but not before I saw him exchange a look with Jennifer. A look that said this was expected, even welcomed. "Help me up," I moaned, reaching for the table. As Bradley pulled me to my feet, I made sure to brace myself on his shoulder, leaving myself vulnerable. That's when he did it. A subtle push meant to look like he was steadying me, but actually designed to send me back down. This time harder, my hip hitting the table's edge. The hidden camera in the corner caught every second of it. "Oh God, Dad, are you okay?" His concern was theatrical, performed for witnesses who didn't exist. "My hip!" I gasped, playing up the pain. "Bradley, why did you push me?" "I didn't push you. You're confused. Let me call Dr. Reed." "No," I said firmly, then let confusion creep back in. "I mean, who's Dr. Reed? I want Dr. Patterson. He's been my doctor for 20 years. Dr. Patterson retired. Remember, Dr. Reed is better for your condition." While they fussed over me, I noticed something had fallen from Jennifer's purse. A hotel keycard from the Hilton, and a receipt. The receipt was itemized, showing room service for 2 and a charge for extended stay services. The name on the receipt wasn't Marcus Volkov. It was Dr. Timothy Reed. So Jennifer wasn't just cheating with the Russian mobster. She was also involved with the doctor who was helping murder me. The web of betrayal was more complex than I'd imagined. I pocketed both items while they helped me back to the chair. "Maybe you should stay here tonight, Dad," Bradley suggested. "I can take care of you." "That would be nice," I agreed. Like old times, Remember when you were 8 and had nightmares you'd crawl into bed with Mom and me? Something flickered in Bradley's eyes. Guilt, regret. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold calculation. That was a long time ago, Dad. Things change. Yes, they do. But justice has a way of bringing things full circle. As I sat in my chair pretending to doze while Bradley and Jennifer plotted in whispers, I thought about the trap that was nearly complete. Every document they'd had me sign was invalid. Every crime they'd committed was recorded. Every conspirator had been identified. Tomorrow I'd spring the second phase of the trap. But tonight I'd sleep in my own bed one more time in the house I'd built, surrounded by the ghosts of better days, and the certainty that Bradley's plans were about to collapse like a building with a rotten foundation. I'm tired, I announced. Going to bed. Let me help you upstairs, Dad. As Bradley guided me to my room, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled. Good news. The cruise is all set for next Tuesday. 1 week from now, you'll be relaxing in the sun. 1 week. He thought he had 1 week to complete his scheme. He was wrong. Newton Crawford's countdown had already begun, and when it reached 0, Bradley would learn that betraying your father came with a price higher than any gambling debt. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear, one of those perfect Colorado days that made you grateful to be alive. I stood in my bedroom adjusting my best suit in the mirror. No more shuffling, no more confused elderly act. Today, Newton Crawford was returning in full force. The past 3 days had been a masterpiece of deception. I'd let Bradley believe his plan was working perfectly, taking my medications regularly while building my stash of evidence. Harold had worked 18-hour days preparing legal documents. Diane had uncovered a web of corruption that reached beyond my family into an organized elder fraud ring. The FBI had taken interest when she'd connected Dr. Reed to 14 other cases of elderly patients who died under suspicious circumstances after their assets were transferred to family members. But today wasn't about the FBI or the larger investigation. Today was about family betrayal and the kind of justice that needed witnesses. I'd sent out invitations 3 days ago for a farewell gathering before my cruise. Bradley had been thrilled, thinking I was making his job easier by gathering everyone in one place for my goodbye. He'd even offered to help with the planning, not knowing that every guest had been carefully selected for maximum impact. The doorbell started ringing at 11. First to arrive was Earl Thompson, my best friend and business partner for 30 years. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. Newton, you look good for a man who's supposedly been in Florida. Funny how stories get twisted, isn't it, Earl? He gripped my shoulder. I knew something was wrong when Bradley showed me those cruise photos. They were from the website, not from you. Whatever's going on, I'm here. Next came the Hendersons from next door, followed by my construction crew, Big Jim Tiny, who was anything but Roberto and Welsh. These men had worked with me for decades, had been pallbearers at Martha's funeral, had watched Bradley grow up on construction sites where he'd worn a tiny hard hat and pretended to be like Daddy. Martha's sister Ellen arrived with her husband Frank, both looking confused about why they'd been invited to a farewell party when they'd been told I was already gone. My banker, Tom Morrison, no relation to Diane, showed up in his 3-piece suit briefcase in hand. The family lawyer everyone knew about, Richard Steinberg, came with his wife. They didn't know Harold Westbrook was waiting in my basement office with the real legal firepower. By noon, my house was full. 43 people who'd been part of my life, who'd trusted me, done business with me, or loved Martha. The dining room table groaned under the weight of food I'd had catered from Martha's favorite restaurant. It looked like a celebration, felt like a family reunion, but was actually a carefully staged tribunal. Bradley and Jennifer arrived at 12:15, faces shifting from annoyance to alarm as they saw the crowd. Dad, Bradley said, pushing through to reach me. What's all this? You're supposed to be resting before your trip. Just wanted to say goodbye properly. I replied, my voice strong and clear. No tremor, no confusion. After all, according to you, I'm taking a permanent vacation. He blinked at my tone, but recovered quickly. That's great. Let me help you with the guests. No need. I've got something important to share with everyone. Why don't you and Jennifer have a seat front row where family belongs? The crowd gathered in the living room, conversations dying as I stood before them. Behind me, the 70-inch TV I'd installed last year waited dark and silent. In my pocket, the remote control felt heavy with purpose. Thank you all for coming, I began. As many of you know, my son Bradley has been telling people I'm moving to Florida permanently. Even arranged a lovely cruise to get me there. Murmurs rippled through the room. Bradley's face went pale. The interesting thing about modern technology, I continued, is how it helps us see truth clearly. For instance, home security systems can show us exactly what happens when we're not around, or when people think we're not watching. I clicked the remote. The TV blazed to life, showing Bradley and Jennifer in this very room 5 days ago. The nursing home in Miami is expecting him when the ship docks. Bradley's recorded voice filled the room. He has no idea it's one way. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Ellen's hand flew to her mouth. Earl's face darkened like a storm cloud. The recording continued, showing Bradley explaining his plan to steal my assets, forge documents, and abandon me in Florida. Every damning word crystal clear, every criminal intention laid bare. That's taken out of context. Bradley jumped up. Dad's confused. He doesn't understand. Sit down, Bradley. My voice cut through his protests like a construction saw through pine. We're just getting started. The next clip showed him discussing my medication with Jennifer, admitting to increasing the dosage to cause confusion. Dr. Chen stepped forward from the crowd. I'd invited him specially for this moment. Those dosage levels constitute attempted murder, he announced. I've already filed reports with the medical board and law enforcement. Jennifer tried to flee but found her path blocked by Big Jim and Tiny. Construction workers had a code about protecting family, and I was family to these men. There's more, I said, clicking to the next recording. This one was from Bradley's phone, showing his text messages with Dr. Reed about expediting my decline for natural causes within 3 to 6 months. Richard Steinberg spoke up. That's conspiracy to commit murder. Federal offense when it crosses state lines to Florida. But I wasn't done. The next clip was audio from Jennifer's hotel room, recorded by Diane, who'd managed to plant a device during housekeeping. The conversation between Jennifer Marcus Volkov and Dr. Reed was explicit about their plan to split my life insurance money once I died in the Miami facility. $2 million, Volkov's accented voice said clearly. Split 3 ways once the old man dies. Should only take few months with increased medications. Martha's sister Ellen stood up, tears streaming down her face. You were going to kill him for Money Newton, who raised you when your mother died, who worked 16-hour days to put you through college. It's not what it seems, Bradley's voice cracked. Dad, please let me explain. Explain. I pulled out the forged documents he'd had me sign. Explain how you were going to cash these with Mickey Mouse's signature, or maybe Donald Duck has a bank account I don't know about. Nervous laughter rippled through the room as I showed the ridiculous signatures he'd never bothered to check. Explain this. I continued producing the pill bottle with the tampered medication. 43 pills that would have killed me if I'd kept taking them, each one preserved as evidence. That's when Harold Westbrook entered from the basement, followed by 2 FBI agents and 3 officers from Denver PD. Bradley Crawford, you're under arrest for attempted murder, elder abuse fraud, and conspiracy, the lead agent announced. You have the right to remain silent. Dad, no, Bradley's composure finally shattered completely. It was Volkov. He threatened to kill me if I didn't pay. I had no choice. There's always a choice, I said quietly. You chose to poison your father instead of asking for help. Jennifer made another break for the door, but was caught by the second FBI agent. As they cuffed her, she screamed at Bradley. "This is your fault. You're gambling your debts. I never wanted this." "Save it for your lawyers," the agent advised. That's when we heard engines outside. 3 black SUVs had pulled up, and Marcus Volkov was being extracted from one in handcuffs. The FBI had coordinated simultaneous arrests across the city. Dr. Reed was picked up at his office, his patient files seized as evidence in 14 other suspicious deaths. The crowd in my living room was silent, shocked by the scope of what they'd witnessed. But I had one more card to play. "Earl," I called out. "Remember that scholarship foundation Martha always wanted to create?" "Of course. She talked about it constantly. Wanted to help kids who lost parents young." "I'm establishing it today. Martha's foundation funded with every penny Bradley tried to steal." "Tom." I nodded to my banker. "Has the paperwork ready?" Tom stepped forward with documents. $2 million established in perpetuity. Bradley and Jennifer's names are permanently excluded from any benefit or control. But the final blow came when Diane Morrison entered with a young woman and 2 small children. Jennifer's parents, who'd been watching their grandchildren while their daughter played her deadly games. "We didn't know," Jennifer's mother said, tears flowing. "We thought she was shopping meeting friends, not this." The children, a boy of 5 and a girl of 3, looked confused and scared. My heart broke for them, innocent victims of their parents' greed. "They'll need stability," I said. "I'm prepared to help however you need. Those children shouldn't suffer for their parents' choices." As the police led Bradley and Jennifer away, Bradley turned to me one last time. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been genuine remorse, or maybe just regret at being caught. "I'm sorry, Dad." "I know," I replied, "but sorry doesn't undo attempted murder." The house emptied slowly as statements were given and evidence was documented. Earl stayed behind along with Big Jim and Welsh. We sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and processing what had happened. "How long did you know?" Earl asked. "Since the cruise terminal. Overheard him on the phone admitting the whole thing." "Jesus Newton, your own son." "The son I raised died somewhere along the way," I said. "Replaced by a stranger who'd kill his father for money." Big Jim, not usually emotional, wiped his eyes. "Martha would be proud of how you handled this. No violence, just justice." "She always said the best revenge was a life well lived," I replied. "But sometimes you need a little legal revenge too." The local news picked up the story that evening. Elder fraud ring exposed by would-be victim. By morning it would be national news. 17 families had already come forward with similar stories about Dr. Reed's patients. The FBI expected that number to triple as the investigation expanded. But sitting in my kitchen with true friends, I didn't feel victorious. Just tired and sad. Tomorrow I'd start rebuilding my life without my son. Martha's foundation would help other families avoid this tragedy. The house would feel empty without the hope that Bradley might someday return to being the boy who'd worn that tiny hard hat. Outside, the Colorado sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of justice and sorrow. Somewhere across town, my son was learning that orange jumpsuits were less comfortable than the designer clothes he'd bought with stolen money. His gambles had finally caught up with him, and the house always wins in the end. But Newton Crawford was still standing still, building, still surviving. And tomorrow, I'd start construction on something new. A life defined not by betrayal, but by the choice to help others avoid the trap that had almost claimed me. The one-way ticket Bradley had purchased was indeed one way, just not in the direction he'd planned. 6 months had passed since the arrest, and the federal courthouse in downtown Denver buzzed with media attention. The case had grown far beyond a simple family betrayal, expanding into what prosecutors called the largest elder fraud conspiracy in Colorado history. I sat in the witness chair, my navy suit pressed, sharp voice clear and steady as I testified. "Mr. Crawford." The prosecutor began, "Can you explain to the court how you first discovered your son's plan?" I looked across the courtroom at Bradley, who sat shackled at the defendant's table. He'd lost 40 pounds, his expensive suits replaced by a gray prison uniform. The gambling addiction that had started this nightmare was being treated in federal custody, but the damage was done. I overheard him at the cruise terminal telling someone I'd be placed in a nursing home in Miami, that the ticket was one way only. For 3 hours, I laid out every detail: the poisoning, the forged documents, the conspiracy with Jennifer and Dr. Reed. The courtroom gasped when I played the recordings, Bradley's own voice condemning him more thoroughly than any prosecutor could. "Did you ever suspect before that day?" the prosecutor asked. "I'd noticed some confusion fatigue, but I trusted my son. When your child says they're helping with your medications, you don't assume they're trying to kill you." Bradley's lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, suggested I'd entrapped my own son. But the evidence was overwhelming. 43 poisoned pills, each one tested and documented. Bank records showing Bradley's gambling debts to Marcus Volkov. Jennifer's hotel records with both Volkov and Dr. Reed. The forged life insurance policy with my supposed signature. "Mr. Crawford," the defense attorney pressed, "you're a successful businessman. Surely you could have helped your son with his debts without this elaborate deception." "He never asked," I said simply. "Instead, he chose to poison me and steal everything I'd built, everything his mother and I had saved. He was willing to let me die alone in a strange city rather than admit he needed help." When Dr. Reed took the stand, the full horror emerged. 17 elderly patients had died under his care in the past 5 years, each one leaving significant assets to family members who'd paid him to ensure their relatives' decline. His medical license had been revoked, and he faced separate murder charges in 3 states. Marcus Volkov had cut a deal testifying against everyone in exchange for a reduced sentence. His thick Russian accent didn't hide his casual brutality, as he explained how he'd threatened Bradley, how Jennifer had approached him with the insurance scheme, how Dr. Reed had been recommended by another satisfied customer. "It's like shopping catalog," Volkov said. "You pick service you want. Quick decline, slow decline accident. Dr. Reed had menu with prices." The jury looked sick. Several elderly jurors wiped away tears, probably thinking of their own vulnerabilities, their own trusted family members. Jennifer's testimony was a masterclass in deflection. She blamed Bradley for everything, claimed she'd been coerced, said she'd fallen in love with Dr. Reed, and had no idea about his crimes. But Diane Morrison's surveillance footage showed her actively participating, even suggesting increasing my medication dose to speed things up. "I was scared," Jennifer sobbed on the stand. "Bradley owed so much money. They threatened our children." But the prosecutor presented her text messages joking about spending my money planning vacations with my life insurance payout, discussing which nursing home would be cheapest for my final days. The other families testified too. Mrs. Chen, whose husband had died 3 months after being placed in Dr. Reed's care. The Johnsons, who'd discovered their grandmother's poisoning just in time. 14 families in total, each one robbed of a loved one, or nearly robbed all for money. My testimony about Martha's foundation drew the strongest reaction. I'd spent the months since the arrest building it into something real. We'd already helped 43 families recover assets from elder fraud, provided legal services to seniors who couldn't afford protection, and established a hotline for suspected abuse. My wife always wanted to help people, I told the court. Bradley tried to use my money for greed. Instead, it's being used exactly as Martha would have wanted. Every penny he tried to steal now protects other vulnerable seniors. Big Jim and Earl testified about the man they'd known for 30 years, the boss who'd treated workers like family, who'd raised Bradley on construction sites, and taught him the value of honest work. Their testimony painted a picture of everything Bradley had thrown away. "Newton Crawford built half this city." Big Jim said, his massive frame filling the witness box. "Built it with integrity, fair wages, and respect. Bradley could have inherited all that legitimately. Instead, he chose poison and lies." The verdict came after just 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Bradley faced 15 to 20 years federal time. Jennifer got 7 to 10 as an accomplice. Dr. Reed received life without parole for the murders he'd committed. Volkov got 8 years with possibility of deportation after. As the judge read the sentences, I watched my son's face crumble. The reality of spending his 40s and 50s in federal prison finally hit home. No more gambling, no more schemes, just decades of concrete and regret. Mr. Crawford. The judge addressed Bradley directly. You betrayed the most sacred trust between parent and child. Your father gave you life, raised you alone after your mother's death, provided every opportunity. You repaid that love with poison. I can think of no worse violation of family bonds. After the sentencing, reporters swarmed outside the courthouse. I'd prepared a statement, knowing this moment would come. Today isn't a victory, I read. It's a tragedy that was preventable. My son chose greed over family, chose violence over honesty. But from this tragedy, Martha's Foundation will ensure other families don't suffer the same fate. We've proposed legislation requiring stricter oversight of elder care, mandatory reporting of suspicious medication changes, and harsher penalties for those who prey on the vulnerable. The legislation, dubbed Newton's Law by the media, would pass the Colorado Senate 3 months later. That evening, I sat in my empty house, surrounded by construction plans for the new Martha's Foundation headquarters. We'd bought Bradley's foreclosed house at auction for 20 cents on the dollar poetic justice that his former home would become a sanctuary for elder abuse victims. Harold Westbrook joined me, bringing Chinese takeout and bourbon. "Hell of a day," he said, pouring generous glasses. "How you holding up?" "I lost my son years ago," I admitted. "Today just made it official." "You saved 17 families, Newton. Probably more we don't know about yet. Martha would be proud." We ate in companionable silence, two old men who'd seen too much, but refused to stop fighting. The Foundation's phone had been ringing all day, families seeking help, seniors afraid of their own children, advocates wanting to volunteer. "Got a call from the governor," Harold mentioned casually. "Wants to give you some kind of citizen's award." "I don't need awards. I need this to never happen again to anyone else." A month later, the Martha's Foundation officially opened its doors. The building that had once been Bradley's monument to greed now housed lawyers, social workers, and advocates dedicated to protecting the elderly. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who knew the story. I kept Bradley's room exactly as it had been when he was 10. Baseball trophies, Boy Scout badges, photos of him helping me build a treehouse. Sometimes I stood in the doorway wondering where that innocent boy had gone, when the poison had started seeping into his soul. Jennifer's parents brought the children to visit occasionally. They called me Grandpa Newton, and didn't understand why their parents were gone. I'd established college funds for both, ensuring they'd have opportunities, despite their parents' crimes. Maybe they could break the cycle. The construction company thrived with my renewed focus. We specialized now in senior-friendly housing safe spaces, where the elderly could live with dignity. Every blueprint carried Martha's invisible signature, her compassion built into every wall. 1 year after the trial, Denver's mayor presented me with the Citizenship Award at a ceremony attended by hundreds. But the real reward came in the letters. Families who'd discovered abuse in time to stop it. Seniors who'd found legal help through our hotline. Children who'd learned to recognize the warning signs of elder abuse before it destroyed their families. "My son thought a one-way ticket to Miami would solve his problems," I said in my acceptance speech. Instead, he bought himself a one-way ticket to federal prison. But every tragedy can become triumph if we learn from it. Martha's Foundation ensures that no senior citizen takes that one-way trip alone and afraid. The applause echoed through the Civic Center, but I was already thinking about the next project. A national database of elder abuse cases, mandatory background checks for geriatric care providers, federal funding for protective services. Bradley had tried to destroy one old man. Instead, he'd created an army of advocates. His greed had birthed generosity. His cruelty had sparked compassion. And somewhere in a federal prison cell, he had 15 more years to think about the father who'd loved him, the mother who'd died believing in him, and the fortune he'd thrown away for the false promise of easy money. The one-way ticket had indeed been purchased, but the destination was justice, and the journey was far from over. 2 years had passed since the trial when I walked through the metal detectors at the Federal Correctional Institution in Littleton. The guards knew me by now, nodding respectfully as I placed my keys and wallet in the plastic bin. This was my monthly pilgrimage, a journey Martha would have insisted on. "Good to see you, Mr. Crawford," Officer Martinez said. "He's waiting in the visiting room." The visiting room smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Families clustered around plastic tables trying to bridge the gap between freedom and incarceration, with vending machine snacks and forced smiles. Bradley sat at our usual table in the corner, hands folded shoulders straighter than they'd been during his gambling days. Prison had paradoxically improved his health. No access to casinos, regular meals, mandatory exercise. The hollow-cheeked desperation that had marked his final days of freedom had been replaced by something harder to define. Not peace exactly, but perhaps acceptance. "Hello, Dad," he said as I sat down. "Son." We'd developed this ritual over 2 years. Short greetings, careful words, rebuilding trust, one conversation at a time. The first 6 months he'd raged and blamed everyone but himself. The next 6, he'd fallen into depression so deep the prison psychiatrist had put him on suicide watch. But somewhere in year 2, something had shifted. "How's the foundation?" he asked. "Growing. We opened a branch in Colorado Springs last month. 47 families helped so far this year." He nodded, a genuine smile creasing his face. "I saw the news coverage in the library. They called you a hero. Heroes don't let their sons fall so far they turn to poison." "Dad, stop." His voice carried authority I hadn't heard since before the gambling consumed him. "We've been through this. You couldn't have stopped me. I was sick and I hid it well, even from myself." This was the Bradley who'd emerged from intensive therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings in prison. The one who'd finally taken responsibility without excuses or deflection. "I got your commissary deposit," he said. "You don't have to keep doing that." "Yes, I do. You're still my son." He looked away, blinking rapidly. Even after 2 years, my forgiveness seemed to surprise him. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot," he said. "Remember when she made me return that candy bar I stole when I was 7, marched me back to the store, made me apologize to Mr. Peterson? She believed in making things right. I can't make this right, Dad. Can't undo the poison, can't take back the betrayal. But I can try to be better. That's why I need to tell you something." I leaned forward, noting the serious tone. "The gambling started when Mom got sick," he confessed. "I couldn't handle watching her fade away. Started with scratch tickets, just trying to feel something other than grief. By the time she died, I was in deep with bookies. After the funeral, when you were lost in your own pain, I convinced myself I could win it back before you noticed." This was new information. I'd assumed the gambling came later born of greed rather than grief. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because you were barely surviving yourself. And because I was ashamed. Newton Crawford's son, the success story, was really a failure drowning in debt. When Volkov's people started threatening, I panicked. Jennifer suggested the nursing home idea, said her grandmother had done it, and no one suspected anything. Is that when Dr. Reed entered the picture?" Bradley nodded. "Jennifer knew him from somewhere, never told me where. He made it sound so simple. Small doses, gradual confusion, peaceful decline. He promised you wouldn't suffer. Poisoning someone is suffering, Bradley. I know that now. The group therapy here, it's helped me understand how I rationalized evil. How I turned you into an obstacle instead of seeing you as my father. The man who raised me alone, who never missed a baseball game, who taught me to use a hammer before I could write my name." A family at the next table erupted in laughter over some shared joke. The sound felt alien in this place of consequences and regret. Jennifer had the baby, Bradley said quietly. Another girl. Her parents sent photos. I'd heard. Jennifer had given birth in the women's federal facility the baby immediately placed with her parents. Another innocent child affected by their parents' choices. I've signed away all parental rights, he continued. It's better for them. They don't need a poisoner for a father. Bradley. No, Dad. Some things can't be undone. But I can make sure I don't poison their lives, too. I've been working with the FBI providing information about the gambling rings, the elder abuse networks. Testified in 3 other cases. It's not redemption, but maybe it helps balance the scales a little. I pulled out the folder I'd brought. Speaking of balance, I have a proposition. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. What kind of proposition? When you get out in 13 years, you'll be 48. Still young enough to build something. The Foundation needs people who understand how these schemes work, who can spot the warning signs. I'm offering you a job. Dad, no. He shook his head firmly. I can't work for the Foundation. It would be wrong, like profiting from my crime. Not the Foundation directly, but we're starting a program for recovering gambling addicts who prey on family members. You'd be a counselor sharing your story, helping others before they cross the line you crossed. Minimum wage supervised extensively, but honest work. Bradley stared at the scarred table surface for a long moment. You'd trust me again. Trust is earned in inches and lost in miles. You lost miles, Bradley, but you can start earning inches. What would Mom say? She'd say everyone deserves a chance at redemption, but she'd also say redemption requires work, accountability, and never forgetting the harm you caused. A tear rolled down his cheek. The first I'd seen since Martha's funeral. I dream about her sometimes. She never speaks, just looks at me with such disappointment. She loved you, Bradley. That never changed even when you changed. I threw it all away. Your love, her memory, my family, my freedom. For what? The spin of a roulette wheel. Addiction is a disease. I said, repeating what his therapist had told me. But choosing to poison your father was a crime. You're paying for the crime. The disease we can treat. The guard announced 15 minutes remaining. Around us, families began their reluctant goodbyes, children clinging to fathers they saw once a month, wives kissing husbands through tears. There's something else, I said. I've been talking to the warden about education programs. You could finish your accounting degree, maybe get an MBA. Use those skills legally this time. After what I did with my first degree? What you do with knowledge depends on who you choose to be. You chose wrong before. Choose better next time. Bradley stood when the final announcement came. We didn't hug, that barrier hadn't fallen yet. But he extended his hand, and I shook it, feeling the calluses from prison work detail. Thank you for coming, Dad, for not giving up on me completely. Martha wouldn't let me, I said simply. As I walked back through the prison gates, I thought about redemption and its price. Bradley would serve 13 more years emerging near 50 to rebuild a life from scratch. Jennifer was in a women's facility in Texas, her children growing up without her. Dr. Reed would die in prison, his victims finally at peace. Volkov had been deported after serving 3 years banned from ever returning. But the ripples continued outward. The Martha Foundation had become a national model, inspiring similar programs in 12 states. Newton's Law had been adopted federally, protecting millions of seniors. The construction company now employed 15 former gamblers in recovery, men and women, who'd chosen help over harm. I stopped at the cemetery on the way home, as I always did after visiting Bradley. Martha's headstone was simple granite, the way she'd wanted. I'd added fresh roses that morning, her favorite yellow blooms bright against the gray stone. He's trying, sweetheart, I told her. Still has a long way to go, but he's trying. You always said there was good in everyone, even when they couldn't see it themselves. Maybe you were right. The wind whispered through the trees, and I could almost hear her voice. Love isn't giving up on people, Newton. It's holding them accountable while hoping for better. That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing foundation cases. 17 more families saved this month. Seniors protected assets, recovered, abusers prosecuted. Each case file represented a tragedy avoided a family that wouldn't be torn apart like mine. The phone rang. Harold's number. Newton thought you should know. The governor signed the expanded Newton's Law today. Mandatory life sentences for medical professionals who cause patient deaths for profit. Federal oversight for all elder care facilities. You did it. We did it, I corrected. Bradley's crime started this, but it took all of us to create change. After hanging up, I looked at the photo on my desk. Martha and me on our 40th anniversary, Bradley between us all three smiling at the camera. Before the gambling, before the poison, before the betrayal, when we were just a family who loved each other, that family was gone shattered by greed and addiction. But from its ashes, something new was growing. Not the same, never the same, but perhaps eventually something worthy of Martha's memory. 13 more years. Bradley would emerge to a world where elder abuse carried mandatory minimums, where gambling addiction was treated as seriously as drug dependency, where the Martha Foundation stood as a guardian for the vulnerable. He could choose to be part of that better world or remain trapped in the darkness that had consumed him. The choice, as always, would be his. But this time, I'd be watching, waiting, and hoping for the son I'd lost to finally find his way home. The one-way ticket to Miami had become a 13-year journey through consequences and potential redemption. Where it ultimately led would depend entirely on Bradley's willingness to become the man his mother always believed he could be. 5 years had passed since that day at the cruise terminal when I discovered my son's betrayal. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, but this time I stood on the deck of a real cruise ship, the Caribbean sun warming my face as I watched dolphins play in our wake. This wasn't a one-way ticket to abandonment, but a celebration of survival resilience and the triumph of patience over pain. Newton, you're going to burn if you stay out here much longer. Earl called from the shaded bar, where he sat with Big Jim and Welsh. My construction crew had insisted on this trip, a week-long cruise to commemorate the 5th anniversary of the foundation and my 73rd birthday. Just thinking, I replied, joining them at the table where virgin daiquiris waited. 5 years of sobriety had taught me to find joy without alcohol, clarity without escape. Thinking about Bradley, Big Jim asked with the directness that made him invaluable on construction sites. Among other things, he gets out in 8 years. Seems like yesterday and forever at the same time. The ship's horn sounded announcing our approach to Cozumel. Families rushed to the railings, children pointing excitedly at the approaching shore. I noticed an elderly couple struggling with their luggage and helped them manage it. The husband's grateful nod reminding me why we'd started this journey. Mr. Crawford Newton. Crawford. A woman in her 60s approached hesitantly. I'm Sarah Chen. You helped my family 2 years ago when we discovered my brother was poisoning our father. I remembered the case. The brother had been using the same Dr. Reed playbook, slowly increasing medications while draining accounts. We'd caught it in time the father recovered, the son prosecuted. How is your father? I asked. Thriving. He's 85 now, sharp as ever, still running his restaurant. He wanted me to thank you if I ever met you. Said you saved his life. We talked for 20 minutes, her gratitude warming me more than the Caribbean sun. These encounters happened regularly, now survivors recognizing the man whose story had exposed a national epidemic. Each one reminded me that Bradley's betrayal had ultimately saved lives. That evening, the ship's captain invited me to dine at his table, an honor usually reserved for celebrities or major donors. The conversation ranged from maritime law to elder care, the other guests fascinated by the story of Newton's Law and the Martha Foundation. "You turned tragedy into triumph," the captain observed. "Not many could have done that." "Patience and planning," I replied. "The same skills that build skyscrapers can rebuild lives." After dinner, I found myself back on deck, this time under a canopy of stars. My phone buzzed with a message from Diane Morrison, now the Foundation's head of investigations. "Newton thought you'd want to know. We just prevented our 1,000th case. A grandmother in Maine, children plotting to declare her incompetent. Local authorities arrested them this morning. She's safe. 1,000 families protected. 1,000 potential tragedies avoided." I thought of Martha, how proud she'd be that her name was synonymous with protection and justice. The next morning brought a surprise. As I entered the breakfast buffet, I saw a familiar figure serving behind the omelet station. Roberto, one of my construction workers, grinned and waved me over. "Boss, my nephew works on the ship. Told him you were aboard and he insisted on making your breakfast personally." The nephew Miguel crafted a perfect Denver omelet while telling me how Roberto's stories about fair wages and worker respect had inspired him to ensure good conditions for cruise ship workers. Another ripple from the Foundation's work, spreading beyond elder care into broader justice. On day 3, we docked in Jamaica. While my friends hit the beaches, I visited a local senior center that had reached out months ago, asking for advice on preventing elder abuse in their community. The director, a fierce woman named Precious, showed me around facilities that were basic but filled with dignity. "We heard your story, Mr. Crawford, how you didn't let bitterness win. That's the lesson we teach here. Patience, wisdom, and watching for the signs." I spent the afternoon sharing strategies, promising to send resources when I returned home. The Foundation had gone international requests coming from 12 countries seeking to replicate our model. That evening, a video call came through from an unexpected source, Jennifer's parents with my grandchildren. The boy, now 7, had my eyes, and Bradley's stubborn chin. The girls 5 and 2 giggled and waved at the camera. "Grandpa Newton," the boy shouted. "Grandma says you're on a boat." "A big boat," I confirmed, "with dolphins and everything." We talked for 10 minutes about school friends and the puppy they'd just adopted. Jennifer's parents had done an admirable job shielding them from the truth while maintaining my connection to them. The children knew their parents were away, but not why. That conversation would come later when they were old enough to understand without being destroyed by it. Day 4 found me in the ship's library working on my memoir. A publisher had approached me about writing the full story, proceeds going to the Foundation. I'd resisted for years, but finally agreed, realizing the book could help others recognize the warning signs before it was too late. Chapter 12. The Color of Betrayal. I typed. Poison doesn't always come in bottles. Sometimes it comes in smiles from people you trust, in helpful hands that hide harmful intentions, in love corrupted by greed. That's powerful stuff. I looked up to find a woman my age reading over my shoulder. She apologized for intruding, then introduced herself as Diana Hartley, a retired federal prosecutor who'd followed the case. "I used your case in my final prosecutions," she said. "The recordings you made, the evidence you gathered, textbook example of building an airtight case while protecting yourself." We talked through lunch, her sharp legal mind appreciating the chess game I'd played with Bradley. By dinner, we were discussing the Foundation's future, her experience offering insights into expanding our legal advocacy. "You know," she said over dessert, "I'm retired but not dead. If you need legal consultation for the Foundation, I'd be honored to help." Earl, eavesdropping shamelessly from the next table, gave me a thumbs up. At 73, I wasn't looking for romance, but I'd learned not to close doors on new partnerships, professional or otherwise. Day 5 brought the most unexpected encounter. During the evening show, a young man approached during intermission. "Mr. Crawford, I'm Jackson Reed. Dr. Timothy Reed was my uncle." I tensed, but he held up peaceful hands. "I wanted to apologize for what he did for the families he destroyed. I'm in medical school now, specializing in geriatric care. I want to be the opposite of what he was, to honor the victims by protecting others." We spoke briefly, his sincerity evident. He'd changed his last name but kept the first, a reminder of where he came from and where he refused to go. Another ripple, this one, transforming poison into medicine. The final day at sea was bittersweet. I'd found peace on this journey, but reality waited at home. The Foundation needed guidance, legislation required lobbying, and Bradley's eventual release demanded preparation. That evening, the cruise director announced a special presentation. To my surprise, they called me to the stage. The entire dining room erupted in applause as the captain presented me with a plaque, Honorary Admiral of Elder Protection. Your story inspired changes in how cruise lines handle elderly passengers, he explained. We now have mandatory welfare checks for solo elderly travelers, verification protocols for family bookings, and trained staff to spot potential abandonment. You've made the seas safer for seniors everywhere. I stood before 500 clapping strangers, some wiping tears, others sharing their own stories of family betrayal and redemption. The weight of their trust felt heavier than any construction beam I'd ever lifted. Back in Denver, life resumed its rhythm. The Foundation's new headquarters, built on the site of Bradley's former home, bustled with activity. Lawyers, social workers, investigators, and counselors worked together, a fortress against elder abuse. I visited Bradley the week after returning, sharing photos from the cruise. He studied them carefully, noting the changes 5 years had made. "You look happy, Dad. Really happy." "I am. Not the happiness I'd planned, but happiness nonetheless." "I've been thinking about when I get out," he said. "Maybe I won't take your job offer. Maybe I should start fresh somewhere else where the Crawford name doesn't carry this weight." "Running doesn't erase the past, son. Facing it does." He nodded slowly. 8 more years to figure it out. 8 years to become the man your mother believed you could be. That evening, I stood in Martha's garden, now tended by a Foundation volunteer who shared her love of roses. The blooms were magnificent yellow petals catching the setting sun. I thought about the journey from that bathroom stall in the cruise terminal to this moment of quiet victory. Bradley had meant to buy me a one-way ticket to oblivion. Instead, he'd purchased a round-trip journey through hell that had emerged into purpose. The Martha Foundation stood as proof that patience, planning, and persistence could transform poison into medicine, betrayal into protection, grief into growth. "We did it, sweetheart," I whispered to the roses. "Not the life we planned, but maybe the life that was needed." As stars emerged in the Colorado sky, I thought about the thousands of seniors sleeping safely tonight. Because of our work, the families spared the agony of betrayal, the children who'd grow up knowing their grandparents' love without fear of exploitation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new cases, new battles for justice. In 8 years, Bradley would walk free, facing the choice between redemption and repetition. The grandchildren would grow, eventually learning the truth about their parents. The Foundation would expand, saving more lives, preventing more tragedies. But tonight I was simply Newton Crawford, 73 years old, standing in his wife's garden, grateful for the wisdom to see through deception, the patience to wait for justice, and the strength to transform a one-way ticket to abandonment into a round-trip journey to purpose. The cruise had ended, but the voyage continued. And somewhere in federal prison, my son counted down the days until his own journey could begin. Whether it led to redemption or ruin remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. The one-way ticket he'd tried to give me had become his own passage through consequence toward an uncertain destination. Martha always said love meant never giving up on people while still holding them accountable. As I headed inside, I carried that truth like a compass, guiding me through whatever waters lay ahead. The boy who'd worn the tiny hard hat was still in there somewhere waiting to be rebuilt. And Newton Crawford had never met a construction project he couldn't complete. 8 more years, The foundation of redemption was already laid. Now came the patient work of building something worthy on it, one brick of better choices at a time. As our story comes to a close, I want to ask you something. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below, because every experience helps others recognize the warning signs and protect themselves. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and redemption. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of something greater. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, the strongest foundations are built on patience, wisdom, and the courage to transform pain into purpose. Until next time, watch out for each other and never forget that justice may move slowly, but it moves surely.